welcome back to Warrior Moms Podcast. I'm Michele.
And I'm Amy.
We're glad you're here.
Yes, we are so glad you're here. We are here because we are warrior moms. We both have lost our sons. I lost Alec 4 years ago when he was 24 years old, and Michele.
Lost Carter 7 years ago, and he was 17.
Yes, well, and today we're going to learn a lot more about Carter and Michele and kind of the whole story. Just, Michele, we want to hear about Carter. We want to hear about what happened. And we want to know how you have lived these last 7 years and have become a strong and beautiful soul and just who you are today. Okay? So you want to start out? We'll just jump right in if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So tell us who Carter was.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to start kind of telling, how we lost Carter with backing up kind of our South Dakota story, and that'll kind of tell who he was as well. So I'm from South Dakota, and we, try to go home every summer and spend a couple weeks, and it's one of our favorite weeks of the whole entire year. It's in the Black Hills, so picture the Rockies, but lower, more accessible, way less people. But it's just absolutely glorious. It's beautiful. And so, we camped. We rented cabins with my sisters and mom and dad, and that means sitting around the campfire and singing, and Carter's just right in there, whatever the girls are all doing.
Loving every minute.
Yeah. And that also means mountain biking. He loved rock climbing and bouldering, cliff jumping at the lake, and kayaking. He's just outdoor.
He loved it. Adventurous.
Yeah, absolutely loved every moment. Spending time with his buddies.
Mm-hmm.
We had lived in South Dakota and had been away for a while, and getting to see his friends. He also turned 17 while we were there, so that was Thursday. He turned 17, and my sister Melanie and Sky had all of us over at their house on a barbecue, and gave Carter all the presents. And you would think each little present, whether it was a T-shirt or jumper cables that my dad gave Carter, that it was the best gift. It was the perfect, everything he ever wanted. My youngest sister, Melissa, and her husband, Ken, gave Carter his own car. And it was their car, and they gave it to him. And he was so incredibly thrilled about that. And then the next day, we had his senior pictures. So some family friends have this beautiful horse property up on the hills, but it overlooks, what you picture probably South Dakota ranch land.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see weather for miles and miles. And that was an incredible day. Our whole entire family came out, and our family friends, they were all there. I walked around with the photographer holding the little, the light shield, and just made Carter laugh. At one point I was like, come on, get your muscles looking bigger, so they're just precious pictures. And that kind of captures Carter, just sweet, goofy.
Loved his family.
Loved his friends.
Was in the moment.
Yeah, always just so present. And so Greta and I and Carter, so we had two cars now, his newer car, and drove back to Atlanta. He was supposed to start his first day of his senior year on Monday. And so we left early Saturday morning, and Greta would,
car hop.
Yeah, car hop, and we'd call, and, they'd sing, and then they'd jump in our car, and it was just so much fun. It takes 2 days, and so the second day we got in, it was right around 1:15, and I was fine on the drive, and for some reason I was sicker than sick, and had a migraine and just awful, so I get in the tub, I get out of the bath, and I was like, I gotta get back in the tub. I just felt so terrible, so I poured another bath. Pretty soon Carter comes in, Mom, what's the matter? And he had a tray of, he made me toast and water and all these different remedies of Sudafed and,
Just
all
get
these
you better,
things.
yeah.
Yeah. Mom, are you okay? And I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I just don't feel good. That also shows a little bit about Carter, that he had this just sweet, just really kind side to him. He already had his contacts out and goober glasses on, and his comfortable clothes to go to sleep. And we had gotten his proofs from his senior pictures, and we found out later, but he had posted a picture on Snapchat that it was this beautiful picture of him sitting kind of reflecting off, into the distance underneath this huge oak tree, with the sun kind of going down in the background. It's beautiful. And he had posted that on social media and said, let's get this year started.
Yeah.
And he, some friends reached out to him from Roswell High School, not where he went, and they didn't start school for another week.
He played lacrosse with them.
Yes,
correct?
played lacrosse, and so he met up with a group of them, and they all hung out, and kind of a love interest of his was there that night, and
Even better.
yeah, and so they stayed, and that was where, unfortunately, they just were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
This kid said, later in interviews that he was hunting for 6 months, and he wanted to be the first school shooter and serial killer. And so he had been in Roswell High School, I believe, 3 times prior, had stolen some stuff, we found out later, out of like the band shed. Yeah. And he saw Carter and Natalie, and you can imagine smooching in their car.
Yeah.
And, he pulled Carter out of the car, and he knocked him out with the butt of the pistol. And Carter went out cold, and then he was trying to pull Natalie out. And Carter came to and then charged after him, and then that was when Carter got shot. So he got shot in the head. And soon after, then Natalie was shot as well. And the kid left, stole a bunch of stuff of Natalie's belongings and credit card and some of Carter's things, left, but then came back and did some just creepy things to the kids after they were gone. And so that morning, I woke up early and without the alarm, and I'm sure it was, the excitement of course in his first year of his, what should have been the first day. Yeah.
First day of his senior year. Let's go, right?
I walk into his room and he's not there. And Carter was the kid who truly told us so much good, bad, and ugly. It was just, he just wasn't open.
Sometimes you were like, please stop
Please,
telling
I
me
don't
that.
need to know all those details. And so it was so strange that he hadn't told us where he was. And so immediately I just, how mom just knows.
Your heart sinks.
Yeah, I just knew.
Sinks. Yeah.
And as Greta describes it, I was just racing around like a maniac. I mean, just out of control. I called hospitals and jails. Carter had never been in either.
Yes.
But there had to be an explanation.
Because I'm sure you called his phone and he wasn't answering.
Everything.
And,
Yeah. And I called my niece to see if she knew anything in South Dakota, because that's Carter's absolute best friend. And I thought, well, maybe he told her what he was doing. And they're 2 hours different. So this is 5 a.m. This is 3 a.m. for them. And Jeremy decided, my husband decided, well, I'm going to go towards the high school, because Carter was part of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And he's like, well, they go to breakfast a lot of times. Maybe he went to breakfast, so I went one way, he went one way. And then Greta and I got into Carter's computer and found that his cell phone only had 6% battery and was the other direction.
Okay.
So I put my little 8-year-old Greta with her stuffed animal bunny in the back seat, and off we go. And we came upon the crime scene. We didn't see the kids, but in my recollection, I don't know how many it was, but it seemed like 40 plus SWAT teams and ambulances and fire trucks, and the yellow tape was already up, and this was near a Publix in Roswell, Georgia, and I pull up, and there was already a car there. A man was screaming at the police to let him back there, that his daughter was back there. And I just knew it was beyond awful. I get out of the car and find out that they're not going to let us go any further. So we get back in our car, and they had told us that the detectives were around front, and to go park, and they'll update us. So we pull around, and Jeremy had already gone in. He had come in a different entrance.
Oh my goodness.
And so Greta and I pulled up, and I could see Jeremy inside talking with this woman detective, and I mean, everything's just a blur. I don't exactly know. I knew I couldn't cry at that moment, but I just knew in my heart that Carter was gone. And so I was, calling my sisters, my family. Jeremy came out, said, it's really bad. It's really, really bad. At some point, the detective comes out, and we had just sat ourselves just on the sidewalk, literally right outside. And they were in a UPS store, and they came out and needed to identify Carter, and he had on 2 bracelets, and one was like those plastic bracelets, one was for children's cancer, which also shows a piece of Carter. It was something he bought on his own that, he loved kids and would have been a great dad. And then I had a student who had to have a heart transplant that summer, and it was so scary. And Carter had met Taylor earlier that spring, and so we had on this Taylor Strong bracelet for her. So we knew, of course, that it was him, that it was Carter, and the kids were gone. It was just absolutely horrific. I just don't even know. There just aren't words for sure.
I couldn't.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine.
and there's things that you remember that stick out, and of course, I'll ask friends and family, like, tell me your part of the story, because you can't remember pieces. Like, what did I say to you? What did you do?
What did you do?
Yeah. And I guess I had texted this friend of mine. We had only been in Georgia for 9 months, 10 months. And so we didn't have any family in town. And I had coworkers, and they were wonderful people, but, they
weren't your family.
Right.
Yes.
And so I texted this friend of mine that I worked with and just said, Carter's dead. I need people here. Please, please come. Here's where we are. I swear she was here in 10 minutes.
Greta was with you.
And Greta was with me, just holding her little stuffed animal bun.
And she was
8.
8 years old.
8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a whole nother level of hurt.
It is. It was so sad. And of course, Natalie's parents come, and it just was, I don't even know, so many things. But it's interesting, walking back through kind of those trauma moments. There's parts of it where one of my sisters calls it God winks. It's these moments that happen that there's no other explanation than something bigger than us.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And one happened right there in front of the UPS where we were, sitting on the sidewalk still with Natalie's family, and this Catholic priest walks up, and he says, parishioners called and said there was a great need for prayer. Would you mind if I prayed with you? I was like, of course, and so he leans over, kind of, trying to huddle over us as he prayed. And Natalie's dad was, really having a hard time, and he said, he was so upset because Natalie hadn't been baptized, and he said, would you go around and, would you, or just saying, he just said that she hadn't been baptized, and she just felt bad about that. And the priest said, I would be honored if I could do that, if I could ask, if they would let me, I will go and ask. And so he does, and comes back and says they'll let me back. And it's just unbelievable, that gift to us to do that. And so he comes back, and I've never seen, he was green. Just his skin was,
That was so hard.
The
That was
trauma
so
for that
big
man,
of
you
him
know,
to
and he
do
came
that.
back and he said that was one of his greatest honors he's ever had, was to be able to do that. And he got to pray over both kids. And then he had set up, he said he, you know, cleared one of the chapels and that you guys could go sit in the chapel, and the detectives know where you are and they'll come find you. And that was also just a beautiful thing. You know, you go in, it's this huge cavernous but beautiful church, and just people quietly came up, the parishioners, and somebody would put a blanket around you or somebody put their hands on you and just pray. One person, you know, slid a stuffed animal in Greta's lap, just as we were all crying and trying to figure this out.
Well, you couldn't have been in a better place.
Yeah, it was.
Because nobody knows what to say. Y'all didn't know what to say. You didn't know which way to look.
No.
And you were in the right place. Like you said, God had his hands on y'all.
It was unbelievable, just the people who show up. You know, I describe it, and it feels so strange to say, but it's like, you know, the darkness was just stripped away at that moment, and yet it's like all of the light. God was like, oh yeah, I'm going to put all these beautiful people in your life, you know, so thank goodness for that. And our pastor came from the Episcopal Church where I worked, and another just beautiful, special moment. She, you know, got down on her knees at Greta's level, and she said, honey, I'm just so sorry. And of course, Greta was crying, and she said, is this really confusing? And Greta said, yes. And she said, well, I just want you to know that your heart is breaking, and it's just going to continue to break and break and break. And one day, God and Carter are going to help put your heart back together again, and you'll know it, you know. So they're just, it's crazy to think back those days and yet to be able to see beauty in the midst of just horrible.
And you do see there are good people.
Times.
There are good people in this world.
Yes, absolutely.
They're bad. Unfortunately, you had both of them in the same day. But I'm glad that there were good people there to surround y'all and just love on y'all and everything. And I'm sure that the service, you know, then you had to plan a service and
we had
all of that.
It was unreal. The school wanted to do a memorial, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, who did Carter even really know? I mean, he played football and he played lacrosse, but outside of that, I thought, oh gosh, who's going to come? And so it was right before, you know, it was the night, probably 2 or 3 nights before the funeral, but we were trying to figure out, well, who's going to speak, you know, and my dad's one of 16. He's the oldest boy of 16 kids, and so he, you know, I was asking him as kind of the orator of the family, you know, like, well, how's this going to work? You know, are you going to speak? Do I need to speak? Will the principal? I mean, what do you think? And my dad said that he'll open up in prayer, and then if I wanted to speak, and whoever, we could do that. And so this was really kind of one of the first God winks that I mean, there were a lot, but that showed up. And so I'm going to back up just a tiny bit. That afternoon, we had our first detective meeting at our house, and it was really, really awful, of course, as you can imagine, and just getting a lot of the details of how the kids had died. And it was just Jeremy and Greta and I, and we're hugging and holding each other. And Jeremy said, you know, Greta, I don't know how this will work, but God's going to let us know that Carter's okay. You know, people say feathers will show up and pennies and dragonflies and, you know, and he's like, I don't know how it works, but we just have to look. We just have to wait and see, because Carter and God will let us know. And Jeremy said, well, so if Carter could send something, what do you think he would send to let us know? And she was like, I don't know. He likes sports, so maybe dogs and lots of balls, you know, would show up. So Jeremy said, you know, yeah, it might be that we're going to see more dogs, but he said, I don't know. I could see your brother sending us hawks or eagles soaring above us, you know, darting through the trees and just keeping watch over us. So now fast forward, we're back at the memorial, and there were, for some reason, the media was crazy about our story. They camped outside, and so there was 20-some, media trucks up on the hill. And we were down below, and there was this beautiful, huge tree in front of River Ridge High School where Carter went. And some lacrosse moms had gotten a number 4, and they had already ironed it onto the boys' lacrosse jerseys. And so they were in a U shape in front of the huge tree. And then they had a table with flowers, and then they made big poster size pictures of Carter. So he was in the midst of all the boys on the table. So that's where my dad stood out. And gosh, there was 300 some people that ended up showing up. And my dad opened in prayer, and my sister Melanie had written it. And it was when we were trying to figure out what to say. My dad's like, "Oh, I'll open up in prayer." And Melanie's like, "I've already written one." So it was just neat that it was this collaborative effort. But so my dad, reads the prayer, and this hawk, as he's reading it, comes. And I didn't know the difference between hawks and, what types, Cooper hawk, red-tailed hawk, all these different things. And now I do. But this hawk lands on this huge tree above my dad. It's just squawking. And as my dad finishes, and the hawk soars out kind of above where, we were all listening, turns, and then flies off. And so then I got up and spoke, and one of my other sisters, Melissa, spoke. And then it was like, "Oh my gosh, where's Greta?" I realized she wasn't right there. And one of the lacrosse moms brought chalk, and she was like, "We're going to write messages to Carter on the sidewalks." And so at this point, all of the lacrosse and football players were just kind of, really having a hard time crying. And so we're, kind of lifting these big boys and, let's head over to the pavement or, the sidewalks. And so we get everybody lined up, and it's long, really long school. So all the way down this sidewalk. And here comes that hawk. I don't know if it's that exact hawk, but here comes a hawk.
A hawk.
Right.
Yeah.
About 10 feet above the kids with all these little sparrows chasing it. And so since then, we have seen hundreds, maybe thousands of hawks. It's just crazy. And we'll talk about that in another episode, some more Godwings. But
I know all the hawks. I mean, I don't know all the hawks, but I've heard all the different hawk stories, and then just in random places that you would not see hawks, like downtown Atlanta, and just different places. So I love that.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that.
That was kind of just ties back to what I said about in the midst of trauma. If your eyes are open, you can find beauty in it. Yes. Maybe not at that very moment, but that particular day we did see that.
Sometimes it's definitely hard.
Yeah.
So, the service that did so good, and then, beautiful service, and then you had all the family in town from South Dakota and who knows where else, and then everybody leaves.
Yeah.
And then now, they all go back to their normal lives, and you go back to your quote-unquote new normal life.
Yeah.
How was that transition for you?
Well, and we were living in a townhouse up in Roswell, and because of all the media and just we were renting so that Carter could go to school up in Roswell, and Greta and I were going to school down in Brookhaven. We were like, why not move? This is a painful place, lots of memories, and so we had moved. So after everyone left, of course, there we are left with our boxes, and we have Carter's boxes, all of his things in boxes in the garage, and it was awful. Yeah. I would drive Greta to school, drop her off, and cry the whole way there and cry the whole way back and climb right back into bed. And about 2 weeks into doing that, Greta, on the way home one day, was like, "Mom, I'm going to school. Why aren't you going to school? Mm-hmm. Or when are you going back to school?" Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, gosh, here's this precious little, yes. And so I decided that I too would join her. Mm-hmm. And so to do that, I was so anxious. It was I almost to the point of like a panic attack. It was like, how am I going to do this? Everyone's going to want hugs and the crying and all of this. And then
they're going to ask 1,000 questions.
Ask 1,000 questions. And then here's all of my 8th graders who I've never met, because this was, I hadn't seen them. Yeah. And then here's their teacher that's bawling and crying. And yet we've got to, talk about literature and like, how would all that work? And so I decided I would write my students a letter. And I asked my school if it would be okay if we gathered several days before I came, and I could read my letter to the 8th graders, and have the kids would leave. It would be after school, and then the rest of the staff could come in and see me and so forth. And then when I came for school, it was as normal as possible day
for them.
Yeah. And so I was so glad I did that, because I got to tell the kids really kind of what to expect, that I'm going to be sad, I'm going to cry, I might fall apart in the middle of teaching something, but I'm also still like I was. There's parts of it, like I still am Carter's goofy mom, and Greta's mom who loves to sing and dance, and I want them to expect that as well. And that was good to be able to see them, to see that I was standing, I'm going to be okay eventually. And that what's so beautiful looking back is that they are so intertwined in my grief story. If I was having a hard day, I could just say to them, okay, you guys, I need some jokes, or I need, some distractions. And they just were so sweet.
I love that for you.
Yeah, it really was an incredible group of
Sometimes
kids.
you have to tell people.
Yeah,
You have to tell people, and they will come to your side and rescue whatever.
Yeah, they show up.
So people were showing up at school, and you were, you had that routine down. What was it like at home when you went then you went home and you had to go back to normal life? It was not normal.
No, and Jeremy was working from home at that time. He was studying for his last set of medical boards before residency, and he was doing an accounting job, so he's home alone. So he's having a hard, terrible day, right? His own grief journey happening. So by the time Greta and I got home, he was just spent, and he was finishing his day and had to lay down. I was the same. The second I walked in the door, I had to go straight to bed. It was like there was just no other option. So here's little 8-year-old Greta. I cry every time I think about it. And she just had to busy herself and do her homework. And, she learned to make cup mac and cheese and cereal, and she'd wake us up. Sometimes one of us would wander down and help her, but she was pretty self-reliant, and it's amazing looking back. Like, she was being strong for us, this little 8-year-old precious one, and she'd wake us up a lot of nights, say, Mom, it's 8:00, it's time for bed, time for prayers. And then we'd go and lay down and cry and talk about her brother and pray together and repeat the next day. So those were hard, really, really hard moments. And I also was trying to protect her somewhat, because you just want to scream and pound your fist, and you need to be able to sob like you've never sobbed before. But I didn't want it to scare her already than it already was with her mom sleeping every day. And so one of the things that I did early on, which I'm so glad, is Jeremy and I would lie in bed, and this friend of mine, Shelby, would send us all sorts of grieving and grief books. And one of the books that we came upon was this book called Heaven. It was written by this pastor, Randy Alcorn, and he goes through all the questions that you have. Does your loved one wear clothes? Do they laugh? Do they, all these different things. And he tries, he combs through the Bible to find any biblical connections, or if there isn't a direct connection, some sort of passage that seems to indicate something. And so we would sit at night and read that and just cry. And after we did that, then I call it, I put myself in deep grief. So I made several Pinterest boards, one for Carter and one for trauma, and one for just prayers, and just think about Carter. What was his favorite things? Find quotes, look at pictures, and just have a really terrible, wonderful cry.
Yeah. You had a routine.
Yeah.
You scheduled your grief.
Yeah.
So you could survive the next day.
Yeah.
For a little bit.
And that seemed to give me enough control of the huge breakdowns.
Enough control of the uncontrollable.
Yeah. And, of course, I still had moments of crying and having to, have moments, so to speak, but not in those huge, large ways.
Now, how do you think that you keep going every day? Because it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
August 1st will be 7 years.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard to hear that number and think it's been 7 years, and then you think at the same time it's only been 7 years.
Yeah.
It's that double thing. And Greta's thriving.
Yes.
Jeremy's thriving, and you're thriving. I feel like everybody is doing well.
Yes.
And so how did you get here? What do you
Yeah.
do you have something that you can contribute that to, or do you think that?
Absolutely. Faith is so much a part of that if we didn't have our faith to lean into, I don't know where I would be. And to be able to see, these God winks that our pastor talked about it, that there's a language of heaven, and that Carter was just a newborn, and yet he somehow was learning this new language really quickly. And she describes that those of us left here, when you lose somebody, the veil between heaven and earth is pulled up, so you can really hear and see messages from your loved ones. And so that helped, having those, being able to see and feel God's presence, certainly. I think talking about Carter, sharing goofy, silly, wonderful stories. Jeremy was the same. We didn't stop and just continued to share. And I know it made people uncomfortable at times, and still does, but he's our son, and I think that really, truly fills us up. Is
New pictures that people send are like, I always say, those are gifts from heaven.
Absolutely.
A new
just
story
treasures.
that you haven't ever heard before.
Yeah.
You meet somebody that knew him, or whatever. I know that.
Yes. So those moments, and then also early on, when we had all these boxes that I said, and, from moving, we had some family, friends of friends, people we didn't know, but friends of friends that had asked, could we come over and unpack your kitchen? And of course, my initial response was, no, I don't want anyone in here. I can't even move. It's just, you can't function. And Jeremy said something so wise, and he was like, this is so much bigger than us. We're just going to have to start saying yes. And that really has been my mantra for the most part, is when somebody asks me to do something, or, anything related to putting me out, in a situation maybe that I would typically want to say no, I force myself to say yes. And that also has really helped me survive.
It makes you get out the door.
Makes me get out the door, yeah. And it allows people just to see the beauty within humanity, that it is there, and that, yes, we had this awful moment, and yet there's still beauty around us. Yeah. So that really helped.
Sure. How did the lacrosse? I know that y'all recently done a 3v3, wasn't it? Lacrosse, and then you have the box car. Those are things that Carter loved. How does that make you?
Yeah, it's there's so many things that have happened since then in Carter's honor that it's just mind-blowing to us as a mom, especially, it's just, it just feels so good. Like
I know that the biggest thing is, I shouldn't say the biggest thing, but one of the big things is we just don't want our children to be forgotten. And that is like validation, years later that, someone started up a 3v3 in his honor.
Yeah.
And, so I know that had to be a big mom smile.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That was a big God wink, no matter what.
Yeah. It was a coach who didn't even know Carter, messaged me on Facebook, and he was the new River Ridge lacrosse coach and wanted to, he said, well, we have the number 4 on the jerseys and there's a picture of your son in the hallways, but I don't know anything about him. Can we meet just to talk to him, talk about him? And in talking, then we created this event. I mean, it's just unbelievable like that. So yeah, having those things to look forward to that, you get to talk about Carter for sure on that particular day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think, is there anything else that you want to share about where you are, where you've been?
I think for any, grieving families out there or people listening that have friends who have lost a child, is just show up. Just be there. That everybody says, oh gosh, just let me know what you need. We don't know what we need. You don't even know hardly how to put your shoes on. No. Let alone.
No, I don't need anything. Leave me alone. Right? This way,
yeah. And
because in your mind, you don't need anything.
Yeah. And your tendency is just to say no because you're so, it's the worst pain you've ever encountered. And so just to show up at the door, continue bringing food. I mean, it was, I think, year 2, maybe even going into year 3, and I was just having a horrible, horrible time. And this coworker said, can we just help do a food train again? It was like, oh my goodness, yes.
That was magic.
It was magic, yeah. So I think, all of us, every single one of us will live through really hard things. All of us experience grief. And I think we need to be honest with what we need and be there for one another.
Yeah. Well, as you know, all of our listeners, I want them to know that, surviving and thriving. The podcast is for your moms, and we want to survive and thrive. And I think you survived there in the beginning, and I do. I see you thriving day in and day out. So I'm so glad that we're friends. I'm not glad that we're friends.
Right.
But I'm glad that we're friends. I'm glad that we're in this boat together for sure.
Well, thanks for letting me talk a little about Carter.
Oh, I love it. And I want to thank all of our listeners for
checking in.
Yes, and we'll talk to y'all next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.